What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode review for Rurouni Kenshin. This is episode 6, and with me, as always, I have Bluespade.
Yep. So now that we're past the whole introductory portion of the story, now I guess we're heading into the main meat of the storyline, in which Kenshin is going to have to deal with several major conflicts in relation to, I guess, well, not personally to him, but things that have happened prior to the Meiji era.
Yeah. Of course, this follows up the post-credit scene from the last episode where we saw this mysterious man in a hat slaughtering a bunch of people, and that's pretty much what this episode revolves around. Is just introducing him as pretty much the new villain.
Yeah. So he goes by the name of I think he went by a different alias, but his actual name is Udo, who's currently just going about just killing like several dozen government officials. Well, not for like any like motivational reason. Just he's just doing it for the fun of it.
Yeah. Uh, so basically, like I forget the name of this guy, but a police officer comes to ask Kenshin for help in investigating this assassin, um, because of his status as the former Batosai.
Yeah.
Um, and Kenshin, like, basically they said there he always leaves a note behind, um, I guess saying what I forget exactly if he says is like what his next target is or what the note says, but he leaves some kind of note behind. Um, and I guess that's how they knew who he was going to his next target was. Um, and he says, I guess he says in the note the exact time as well that he's going to attack them or that he's going to try to assassinate them.
Yeah. So both Kenshin and Sagara go protect this other government official. I forgot the guy's name, but he's hired like like several dozen bodyguards, low level bodyguards to protect him. And of course, he of course accepts Sagara and Kenshin's help. And of course, we get a conversation between Sagara and Kenshin about, well, basically just talking about what happened during the old days before the Meiji era. He also explains about talks about Jin's past as I think as he used to work at the as a Gumi, but he's also swapped allegiances at least a couple times. But he of course points out that the reason he does is because he's just there for the thrill of killing, not for any not to help with any like lofty goals for a certain faction or anything like that.
Yeah, so pretty much this guy's just, I would just say, pretty much straight up evil,
Mhm.
or he gets kills just for the sake of killing.
Yeah, and then of course he infiltrates the mansion by killing several of the guards, and of course he has this like weird, almost like supernatural ability, which he can literally just stare at a person's soul and then just petrify them.
Yeah. And of course he like tries to sneak through the window and petrify everybody in the room. But Sagura manages to break through it. And of course, Jinya, he's surprised that Sagura has actually managed to break the petrification.
Yeah,
Um, and of course, Kenshin eventually joins in too. And of course, he's not really uh, that really affected by the petrification and can break through it as well.
yeah. So both Sagura and Kenshin managed to fight him off. By with Sagura somehow successfully snapping Jin's katana in half, and then Kenshin managing to land a blow on his head. Although, of course, it's not fatal due to the fact that Kenshin still wields that reverse blade.
Yeah, well, and of course, before Jane X makes his exit, he says that Kenshin should fight him next time with a real katana and not the I think it was the Sakabato that he uses.
Yeah, basically, he wants him to go back to his old Batosai days. Uh,
Yeah,
so hopefully. hoping that he can have a much more worthy confrontation against him. So now that Kenshin is being targeted, he avoids going back to the dojo because he knows that Kaoru is gonna get dragged into this. Of course, Kaoru gets wind of this once Sakura comes back, and of course he tells her everything. Kaoru is determined to go to catch up with Kenshin because she's worried that once Kenshin goes out and confronts GNA, she's worried that he's going to end up leaving the dojo permanently because basically about like what Kenshin said that he's more or less like like just a wandering samurai not staying from in one place for too long.
Yeah, and of course, Kaoru just doesn't really want to be left alone. Um, but yeah, she eventually finds Kenshin by the river because we see an earlier conversation between Kenshin and Sakura where Kenshin says that Jin would most likely have his hideout around the river. So that's where Kenshin goes to try to find basically trying to find Jin there.
Yeah, so eventually Kaoru catches up to Kenshin and basically just telling her reasons as why she doesn't want Kenshin to leave her. So she takes off her ribbon on her hair and then gives it to Kenshin and has Kenshin promise to bring it back to her after he confronts Jine. And of course Kenshin does make that promise, but unfortunately Haru gets abducted by Jine. Basically just use her as bait to bring Kenshin to fight him.
Yeah. Well, and for those who don't know, this is kind of the same plot as the first live action Kenshin movie. And I'm pretty sure this is the same. Jinie was also the villain in that because it's the same guy because he does the same thing in that movie where he like petrifies people with a stare, and he just starts slaughtering a bunch of people. But that was also where they introduced another villain. So I'm kind of wondering which is the right which is the right interpretation of events because I remember there was this other villain that got introduced before him. Well, there were actually two villains, I guess, in the first live action movie. But here they're kind of introducing him first and having the confrontation between him and Kenshin because in the movie the confrontation between him and Kenshin didn't happen until like near the end, and him kidnapping Kaoru didn't happen until the end of the movie. So I'm kind of curious about like if this is actually how it went down in the source material and if the movie just like changed the
Yes.
like rearranged events.
Well,
Or,
this episode that aired today, it actually does follow the actual storyline, and it of course like more or less repeats the same storyline that was in the original anime from the 90s.
oh, okay.
The one you're talking about in the live action movie, it it does kind of adapt those events with Gine being the final villain of that first movie, but it kind of combines like the fake Batosai guy from the last episode and from the first episode is a completely different person. So
Yeah.
the Gine actually takes his place throughout the entirety of that first movie.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's slightly altered, and the circumstances of how Kenshin meets Sakura and some of the other characters are it's somewhat similar but also different at the same time. But they kind of more or less did their best to to make a decent adaptation from what I guess is from these first 6-7 episodes.
Yeah. I just feel like they just introduced this guy and they're already having like this like confrontation where he's kidnapped Kaoru, but I guess he's not really like a major villain because there is another villain I do know they're going to introduce later, that was also in the first movie. So I think I guess they just introduce him after Jinie. But yeah, I like this episode because it sets up this confrontation between Kenshin and Jinie. I'm just hoping it'll be as intense, I guess, as it was in the live action movie, from what I remember of it. But I mean, they had like a brief fight, I guess you would call it, in this episode, which I thought was okay. But I kind of hope they do some of the same things they did in the live action movie. I'm assuming in the next episode when they end up fighting,
Yeah, they will have their confrontation in the next episode. Uh,
because what I liked about that scene in the movie is that uh, it kind of puts Kenshin in this really difficult position. I won't spoil too much, but just basically that he has to make the choice of whether or not he really, is going to break his rule of not killing anybody to basically save Kaoru's life.
yeah, that is one of the main major plot points, which I'm pretty sure it's gonna inevitably play out by the next episode.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, I thought it was a pretty good episode. I definitely like the things are are getting into. It's finally getting into the main plot. Um, and that I mean, I definitely find it to be the most one of the more interesting episodes so far, just because um, there's actually some real conflict this time. I mean, the first 5 episodes were just kind of, the villains we had were just kind of these, the fake Batosai, and then the old man who was trying to take over the dojo, and you couldn't really take him that seriously. But this guy, he's like actually posing it feels like, he's posing a real threat
Yeah,
to Kenshin and his life.
yeah. Jine is like one of the first major threats to Kenshin, and there will certainly be other characters that'll eventually step in. There is also another character who used to be Shinsen Gumi, is of course Saito Hajime, and then there's also another major villain, Shishio. For people that
Right.
watched the second and third movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely can't wait until they introduce Shishio, because yeah, he is pretty much I guess you'd probably say like the main villain of the series. I mean, I know there's others after him, but I mean, he's probably the one that was like the main one through the original anime at least.
Yeah, he
Um,
like Shishio, of course. He's probably not gonna appear like until maybe, if I were to guess, maybe until the end, like second half of this series, because he is like
yeah,
the biggest villain in the Rurouni Kenshin storyline.
yeah, you're probably right about that. Um, but yeah, I don't really have too much else to say about the episode, though. I don't know if you have anything else to say.
Yeah, well, I am glad that that they're finally getting into the main meat of the storyline with all the introductions finally out of the way. Not to say that they
Mhm.
were bad. It's just that they're going by the same story beats as they did in the original anime series.
Yeah, yeah, but yeah. So far, it's the anime has been fairly promising. I mean, I don't really have too many complaints about it. I just kind of hope that in the next episode, the confrontation will live up to what I saw in the movie, because I thought that movie was actually pretty good. I mean, I'm not sure how it compares as an adaptation. Same with this anime, but I mean, I liked it, so can't wait to see that. But yeah, guys, that all being said, until next time, we will see you all later.